There's a certain kind of person who lives their life as though the universe has singled them out for suffering. Every story they tell ends with them being wronged, betrayed, or misunderstood. To them, pain isn't something that happens. It's something they wear, like armor. And that's the truth about people who always play the victim. Their wounds aren't just part of their story. They are their story. At first, you feel empathy. You want to help, you listen, you console, you reassure. But over time, you begin to notice something. Their pain never ends. Their stories never evolve. They live in a perpetual state of poor me. Every event, no matter how small, becomes another chapter in their ongoing saga of mistreatment. And when you try to hold them accountable, they don't reflect, they deflect. Somehow, you become the villain for even suggesting they might have a role in their own suffering. Psychologically, the victim mindset is a defense mechanism, one rooted in both protection and manipulation. To understand it, you have to look beneath the performance and into the psychology of self-preservation. Many chronic victims didn't start out that way. They were once genuinely powerless, perhaps as children in homes where they were unheard, unseen, or punished unfairly. Playing the victim became their way of surviving. When real vulnerability wasn't safe, self-pity became control. The narrative of powerlessness gave them something predictable: sympathy, attention, validation, and, in a twisted way, safety. Over time, this becomes addictive. The brain begins to associate victimhood with emotional reward. Every time they tell their story and receive comfort or support, it reinforces the cycle. They start to crave it. The world becomes a stage where they can replay the same emotional drama again and again. Never for healing, but for reinforcement. But here's the darker truth. People who always play the victim aren't just avoiding responsibility. They're avoiding transformation. Because the moment you admit your role in your own pain, you regain power, but you also lose the safety of being blameless. And for many, that's terrifying. Responsibility requires growth. Victimhood requires only storytelling. This is why these individuals often resist solutions. Offer advice, and they'll tell you why it won't work. Suggest therapy, and they'll say they've tried it before. Encourage change, and they'll accuse you of being insensitive. They don't want healing. They want witnesses. Not to progress, but to perform. And if you stop validating the performance, you become the next antagonist in their tragedy. The psychology behind this behavior is tied to something called external locus of control. The belief that life happens to you, not through you. People with this mindset feel perpetually at the mercy of circumstances, luck, or other people's actions. They lack the internal belief that they can shape their reality, so their only power becomes emotional influence, guilt, sympathy, manipulation, and make no mistake, chronic victimhood can be one of the most covert forms of control. It may not look aggressive, but it's deeply manipulative. By keeping others trapped in cycles of guilt and pity, they maintain emotional dominance without ever appearing dominant. They disarm through helplessness. They make you feel responsible for their pain, for their moods, for their happiness. And once you start taking that responsibility, they never have to. But it's not always malicious. Many don't realize what they're doing. They're acting out a subconscious script written by years of emotional neglect or abuse. They've learned that being pitied is safer than being blamed. That being the victim guarantees connection, while being strong often meant being alone. So they cling to weakness, not because they love suffering, but because it's the only identity that ever kept them safe. Yet, the tragedy is this: the longer someone lives in that role, the more they sabotage themselves. They begin to attract exactly what they fear: abandonment, exhaustion, rejection. Because sooner or later, even the most compassionate people burn out. You can only rescue someone so many times before realizing they never intended to leave the fire. The cycle usually ends one of two ways. Either the victim finds someone new to play savior, or they double down on self-pity, rewriting the story so that you're the latest villain who gave up on them. In their narrative, every departure becomes proof that the world is unfair. Every failed relationship becomes more evidence that people can't be trusted. They never see that the pattern was never about others. It was always about them. The deeper psychology of this behavior reveals something paradoxical. Chronic victims actually crave power. They just seek it indirectly. They can't handle the guilt that comes with direct control, so they wield emotional power instead. It's the power to make others care, to make others chase, to make others prove their loyalty. Their helplessness is their weapon. And when that doesn't work, they shift tactics. They play the martyr. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me. No one appreciates me. I guess I'm just the bad guy no matter what I do. These phrases are designed to trigger guilt, to keep you emotionally invested, to keep you apologizing for things that were never your fault. But the longer you stay, the more they drain you. You start questioning your empathy. You start doubting your sanity. Because they're not just stealing your energy, they're stealing your clarity. Every time you think you've set a boundary, they twist it into cruelty. Every time you express fatigue, they turn it into proof that you never cared. And eventually, you start feeling like the monster in their story, which is exactly how they maintain control. So what's the remedy? How do you deal with someone who lives in perpetual victimhood without becoming their next casualty? It begins with understanding that compassion and compliance are not the same thing. You can empathize with their pain without endorsing their behavior. You can acknowledge their suffering without feeding their narrative. The key is detachment, emotional clarity that refuses to be baited by guilt. You stop over-explaining. You stop rescuing. You start reflecting the truth back to them gently but firmly. I hear you, but you also have choices. Most won't like that, because accountability feels like rejection to someone addicted to pity. But over time, if they're capable of introspection, those words plant seeds. And if not, you protect your peace. Because people who always play the victim will eventually destroy the stability of everyone around them just to keep their story alive. At its core, chronic victimhood is a trauma response that turned into a personality. It's not evil, but it is toxic. It's a refusal to heal, disguised as a plea for help. And the most loving thing you can do for someone like that isn't to save them. It's to stop participating in the app seat. Teams 5 participating in the I seat. Team 5, but here's the darker truth. But here's the darker truth. People who always play the victim aren't just avoiding responsibility. They're avoiding transformation. They're avoiding transformation. And the most loving thing you can do for someone like that isn't to save them. It is its sigh, illusion that they're powerless. When you step back, something incredible happens. They're forced to face the one thing they've been avoiding all along themselves. And for some, that moment becomes the beginning of transformation. Because once they realize that the story they've been clinging to is the very thing holding them back, the role of victim starts to lose its power. And that's when healing finally begins. When you stop playing along with a victim's script, something remarkable and uncomfortable begins to happen. They start to unravel. Their sense of identity has been built on being wronged, on being the one who never gets what they deserve. And when you refuse to validate that narrative, it feels like you've attacked their very existence. Because in their mind, empathy is proof of worth. Without it, they feel invisible again. And invisibility was the original wound that created the act in the first place. This is what most people don't understand about chronic victims. Beneath their manipulation lies deep emotional neglect. They grew up in environments where acknowledgement came only through pain. Maybe a parent only paid attention when they were crying, sick, or struggling. Maybe love was conditional, given when they were weak, withdrawn when they were strong. So they internalized a dangerous equation. To be loved, I must suffer. That belief follows them into adulthood. It colors every relationship they enter. It makes them subconsciously sabotage happiness, because comfort feels foreign, even unsafe. Peace feels like emptiness. Chaos feels like home. So when life becomes too calm, they'll stir the waters. They'll pick a fight, dramatize a situation, or twist words, not because they want conflict, but because conflict reassures them they still matter. The mind of the victim is trapped in emotional time travel. Their body grows older, but their emotional world remains stuck in childhood. When they experience conflict or rejection, they don't respond as an adult. They react as the child who felt unseen, unloved, or powerless. That's why reasoning with them rarely works. Logic can't heal emotional wounds. They don't need debate, they need safety. But because they seek it in manipulation instead of honesty, they never truly receive it. There's a certain tragedy in that. They long for love, but push it away the moment it appears. They crave acceptance, but reject any form of accountability that could bring them closer to it. To admit their role in their pain feels like betrayal of their identity. They would rather live as the misunderstood hero than risk becoming the villain in their own story. That's how deep their fear runs. Fear of being the cause, fear of being seen, fear of being ordinary without the struggle. And yet, behind every victim persona is a person who's deeply ashamed. Shame is the silent engine that drives their behavior. It tells them they are unworthy, broken, beyond repair. But because that truth is unbearable, they externalize it. They turn it into a story of what others did to them, rather than what they've become because of it. It's easier to blame than to bleed openly. Easier to point outward than to look inward. Their pain becomes a shield, and everyone who gets close enough becomes collateral damage. From a psychological standpoint, this pattern is called learned helplessness. It happens when someone experiences repeated powerlessness until they stop trying to change their circumstances, even when they finally can. They begin to believe that nothing they do matters, that every attempt will end in failure, so they surrender to passivity. They become spectators of their own lives, narrating every loss as destiny, every heartbreak as fate. The world becomes something that happens to them, never through them, and that belief is the greatest prison of all. If you love someone who lives in that prison, you'll feel the weight of it. You'll feel guilty for your joy, responsible for their sadness, exhausted by their stories. You'll spend hours trying to explain perspectives they're not ready to see. But here's the painful truth. You cannot heal someone who's addicted to their wounds. You can offer compassion, but not correction. You can offer space, but not self-sacrifice. Because every time you absorb their pain, you reinforce the lie that they're incapable of carrying it themselves. Healing for the chronic victim begins the moment they realize they're not special for suffering, they're human for surviving. It begins when they stop romanticizing pain as proof of depth and start seeing it as the residue of avoidance. Healing requires surrender, not to others, but to reality. It means letting go of the control that comes from being pitied, then reclaiming the power that comes from accountability. But accountability doesn't mean blame. It doesn't mean shaming them for what they've endured. It means gently showing them that their life doesn't have to revolve around the story of what was done to them, that they can write a new one that doesn't begin and end with pain. This shift is monumental because it reclaims agency. An agency, for the former victim, is terrifying at first. because it means they can no longer hide behind excuses. Yet it's also liberating. For the first time, they can feel what it means to truly choose how they respond, how they heal, how they define themselves beyond their past. For those who've escaped the gravitational pull of a chronic victim, there's also healing to do. Because being close to that energy leaves marks. You may notice how you began to shrink yourself, to speak softer, to walk on eggshells, to withhold your own emotions, to keep the peace. You were conditioned to regulate their storms while ignoring your own weather. And when you finally pull away, you might feel guilt for not saving them. But that guilt isn't truth. It's residue from the manipulation. You were never responsible for healing what they refused to face. True empathy requires boundaries. Without them, compassion becomes codependency. The healthiest thing you can do for someone who always plays the victim is refuse to join the play. You stop being their emotional audience. You stop editing yourself to keep their comfort intact. You show them, through action, that growth is possible only when pain stops being performance and starts being processed. And sometimes, the act of stepping away becomes the mirror they need. Because when there's no one left to applaud their suffering, silence becomes revelation. For some, that silence is devastating. For others, it's the first honest moment they've had in years. The moment they realize the power they kept pretending they didn't have. When that realization hits, transformation begins slowly, like thawing ice. They start to notice their own patterns. They start to question their stories. They start to see that being the victim isn't the only way to be seen. That they can be heard without having to hurt. That they can connect without having to collapse. And that's where redemption begins. Because beneath every person who plays the victim is a frightened child who just wanted to be loved. Without condition, they weaponized weakness because no one ever showed them strength without cruelty. They manipulated connection because honesty never felt safe. But once they start meeting that child inside with compassion, not pity, not performance, but true compassion, the narrative begins to shift. The story changes. The tragedy dissolves. And one day that same person who lived as a perpetual victim might look back and realize that the pain they used to manipulate others was really the pain that needed their own attention all along. The person who once played powerless becomes the one who reclaims power. Not through guilt, not through stories, but through awareness. And that's the truth. Most people never see. The victim isn't evil. They're unhealed. They're terrified of accountability because they mistake it for abandonment. They use pain as protection because vulnerability once meant destruction. But healing doesn't come from pity. It comes from facing the reflection they've spent their life avoiding. The reflection that says, you are no longer what happened to you. You are what you choose to become after.